This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to The World Today. I'm Richard Nta in Nairobi. Here's what's ahead. Bandits kill over 30 people in Nigeria's Kaduna state. Vietnam braces for Typhoon Rai as the number of casualties rises to over 200 in the Philippines. And Hong Kong has chosen its newest batch of lawmakers after a vote under a revamped electoral system. Once again, welcome to The World Today. Let's begin in Nigeria, where bandits have killed at least 38 people in the northwestern state of Kaduna. The incident occurred in the Giwa local government area, where the bandits burnt down homes and vehicles. So far, 29 victims have been identified. The ambush comes just a few days after another 9 people were killed in separate attacks in Kaduna. Kaduna is facing unrest due to the ethnic clashes that have led to the death of over 5,000 people. Banditry in the area has compounded insecurity, with gunmen carrying out abductions for ransom. More than 1,000 students have been kidnapped in northwest Nigeria since December, while schools remain closed due to the threat. Well, China has issued a white paper on Hong Kong's democracy under the, quote, one country, two systems, close quote, framework. It details the origin and development of democracy in the city. China says it aims to clarify facts and reaffirm the position of the central government.
A white paper released by Beijing says the principle of one country, two systems provides the fundamental guarantee for the development of democracy in Hong Kong. Titled Hong Kong, Democratic Progress under the Framework of One Country, Two Systems, the white paper says that under British colonial rule, there was no democracy in the city. It says after Hong Kong was returned to China, the central government implemented the principle of one country, two systems and established democracy in the region. Referring to the 2019 Hong Kong riots, the white paper says anti-China agitators in Hong Kong, acting on the pretext of fighting for democracy, must be held to account for impeding the city's progress towards democracy. It says measures have been taken in accordance with the Constitution and the Basic Law to restore order in Hong Kong. The white paper explains that the Basic Law provides the core components of democracy in Hong Kong and the pathway and principles for its future development. It adds that the Basic Law embodies the principle of Hong Kong people governing Hong Kong with patriots at the core, and grants extensive democratic rights and freedoms to Hong Kong residents. The white paper also reiterates the Chinese people's will for democracy and the bright prospects for democracy in Hong Kong. Zhang Dan, CGTN.
Monday marks the 22nd anniversary of Macau's return to China. A flag-raising ceremony was held this morning at the landmark Golden Lotus Square in Macau. A group of about 500 people, including government representatives, participated in the ceremony. A delegation of mainland Olympians was also there. They arrived in Macau on Sunday at the invitation of the local government. They will also have exchanges with Macau athletes, youth, and residents during their 3-day visit. Well, Israel's health ministry is recommending adding the U.S., Canada, and several European countries to its, quote, red list, close quote. The proposed travel restrictions come as Britain reports a surge in Omicron cases and as the Netherlands enters a period of strict emergency measures. Nawee Jarakel has more from London.
For a lot of Europe, this is a familiar feeling. Colder winter weather and COVID-19 wreaking havoc, forcing governments, they say, to bring in stronger measures to fight back. Germany's banning most travellers from the UK from Monday amid fears around imported cases. Meanwhile, protesters clashed with police in Frankfurt this weekend, with demonstrations taking place in the city of Dusseldorf too, against the use of mandatory vaccinations for some workers. In Italy, there were similar scenes in Turin and in the Spanish city of Barcelona.
I am not against vaccines, and I am not a denier. Yes, I am strongly opposed to the restrictions and the curbs on our freedoms that we have been suffering from since the pandemic began 2 years ago. The ends do not justify the means.
Clashes with COVID protesters injured a number of police officers in London near the official residence of the Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The pressure on him is growing again after his Brexit minister resigned, partly over Johnson's handling of the pandemic. London's now officially on high alert, with surging cases and the highest rate of infection after more than 26,000 new cases were reported there on Saturday. The wider UK is the worst affected in Europe at the moment, with Omicron cases tripling in the same 24-hour period.
We are watching the data, discussing it with our scientists and our best advisors almost on an hourly basis.
Okay.
And we will monitor that very carefully. We will keep the situation under review.
Scientists advising the government warned there could be around 3,000 people a day in hospitals with COVID within a few weeks, unless tougher measures are taken. Across the continent of Europe, the spread of Omicron and its speed are causing alarm. For many, this will be another holiday season with limits on social life at one of the most festive times of year. Luigi Barkil, CGTN, London.
Chinese experts and academics have gathered in Beijing to discuss the country's role in the post-pandemic era. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi also attended the opening ceremony of the conference on Sunday. Lu Surui has more.
Officials taking part in the event said China has played and will continue to play an important role in fighting against the coronavirus pandemic. They said the pandemic should not be politicized, and China will further help with the global economic recovery and develop new partnerships.
So far, Chinese vaccines have helped more than 120 countries and regions. China's zero strategy has also set a good example for pandemic control. China believes vaccines are global public good, and it's eager to build a global community of health for all.
Officials also said China will continue to provide medical equipment and resources to the countries in need, and vaccine donations and production will be a key part of its future international cooperation.
In this ongoing crisis, China has actively led the way for global public health governance, promoted the building of a community with common health for mankind, and acted as a responsible major country.
Experts participating in the one-day conference said China will create a more efficient system for international aid that's closer to international standards. Other topics of discussion included China's relations with the U.S. and Central Europe. Lu Sirui, CGTN, Beijing.
And now to the Legislative Council election in Hong Kong. Results are out for all 90 seats. It's the first election after the system was amended earlier this year under the principle of, quote, patriots administering Hong Kong, close quote.
Hi, Jiao Yang. Now, the results of all the vote counting from all three constituencies were out before noon today. Now, competition in the functional constituency has been very heated this year, seen by the fact that, for example, the sector of import and export and the powerful rural body of Heung Yi Kuk are seeing competition for the first time in the history of the Special Administrative Region. Now, the election is also full of surprises as well. For example, in the financial services sector, Robert Lee, the chairman of the Hong Kong Securities Association, won a seat from a 9-year incumbent. Now, overall, more than 1.3 million people voted for the geographical seats, and the winners range from political veteran Regina Yip Lau Sok Yi from the Hong Kong Island West District to Gary Zhang, a first-time runner representing the New Territories North District. Now, the elected lawmakers from the election committee sector have backgrounds ranging from law to academia to business, and they also include Hong Kong's delegates to the country's legislature. Now, the chief executive for the SAR, Carrie Lam, earlier this morning issued a statement thanking the voters for casting their ballots. While critics say that many new faces in this election might decrease the familiarity of Hong Kong people with their lawmakers, Carrie Lam said that this new LegCo is broadly representative, and she is looking forward to working with these new faces? Yes, most candidates we're seeing at the vote counting station for the entire evening. When we went on the street last night, we were seeing some of the candidates still campaigning on the street by as late as 10:30 p.m. And earlier today, I talked to some of the candidates who won, and they have told me that Lechko used to be quite dysfunctional. Some radical political groups have used tactics such as filibustering to obstruct the passage of laws and important budgets. And now they're looking forward to working with a diverse group who are patriots to join hands in working on problems such as the housing issue and the infrastructure issue here in Hong Kong. Back to you, Zhao.
And in the Philippines, the death toll has risen to more than 200 from Typhoon Rai, which battered the country last week. The strongest typhoon to hit the Philippines this year smashed into southern and central parts of the country. More than 700,000 people were affected. Gretchen Malalad has more from Manila.
We are now seeing a grim picture of the trail of destruction that Typhoon Rai made as it rampaged through parts of the Visayas and Mindanao region Thursday. The death count keeps on climbing despite preparations and evacuations made before the storm hit. Some of the hardest hit areas still has no power and communication lines, so the full assessment of the deaths and damages could happen in the next few days. Houses made of wood along coastal areas were shattered into pieces. Residents who survived the intense winds and massive flooding tried to rummage through the debris to find anything to salvage. Thousands of survivors are in dire need of food, drinking water, and materials to rebuild their homes. There are long lines at water refilling stations, and groceries are already without food. Thousands of military, police, Coast Guard, and fire personnel are being deployed to assist in the search and rescue efforts. The Philippine Coast Guard and Navy have started to dispatch their vessels filled with food, water, and medical supplies. Heavy equipments like backhoes and front-end loaders are also being sent to help clear roads blocked by fallen power poles and trees. Local governments severely affected by the typhoon are appealing for immediate help to the national government and the private sector. They are hoping that building materials and temporary shelters would be sent immediately so that the residents wouldn't spend Christmas under the rain. Gretchen Malalad, CGTN, Manila.
Well, that's it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Thanks for watching.
So this is it. I'm just about to be shot.
Tents here, bottles are being thrown as they do so.
There are about 3 critical bridges here in Marawi. That's one of them. We're going to cross that bridge.
As you can see behind me, police forces
who are replying with gas. Gas just came in.
Tear gas, so it's all begun now.
Divisions leading the charge into West Mosul have brought us here.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots.
This is where most of the fighting has been concentrated.
This is the front line now after 9 days of fighting.
We're about 2 to 3 kilometers from the front
clear
line.
view of this front line position.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Sudanese protesters staged sit-in at the presidential palace to demand return to civilian rule. Bandits kill over 30 people in Nigeria's Kaduna state. And Ethiopian government forces announced they have taken almost all of Amhara region from rebels. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Nigeria concludes testing for 5G as it aims to have the widest fifth-generation network in Africa in 2022. And in sports, we take a look at Burkina Faso's chances in the upcoming Africa Cup of Nations. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you along with me for this hour. Let's begin with news coming out of Nigeria, where bandits have killed at least 38 people in the northwestern state of Kaduna. The incident occurred in the Giwa local government area where the bandits burnt down homes and vehicles. So far, 29 victims have been identified. The ambush comes just a few days after another 9 people were killed in separate attacks in Kaduna. Kaduna is facing unrest due to ethnic clashes that have led to the death of over 5,000 people. Banditry in the area has compounded insecurity, with gunmen carrying out abductions for ransom. More than 1,000 students have been kidnapped in northwest Nigeria since December, while schools remain closed due to the threat. All right, let's turn our attention to Sudan, where demonstrators again are against the military takeover, have vowed to continue with protests until their demands are met. On Sunday, they held a sit-in at the presidential palace similar to the one that eventually toppled President Omar al-Bashir in 2019. This was short-lived after security forces fired tear gas and live rounds to disperse the crowds. Security forces had also sealed off major roads in attempts to block them from reaching the presidential palace, but demonstrators succeeded in breaking the security barriers. The events coincided with the 3rd anniversary of protests that ended former President Omar al-Bashir's rule 3 years ago. Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has warned that ongoing unrest threatens the country's stability.
The arrival of the revolutionaries to the palace is a sign of the symbolism of the palace as it sits in the sovereignty and the presidency of the country, and confirms the revolutionaries are determined to overthrow the regime of the 25th of October and the resulting decisions and procedures, and indicate the revolution continues until it achieves all its goals.
Well, the Ethiopian government has said almost all areas of Amhara region are free of rebels. Waldodia was the last stronghold of the TPLF rebels and was recaptured on Sunday. The exit of the TPLF from Amhara marks the end of their 4.5 months occupation there. The UN is said to have eased travel bans to Ethiopia amid improved security. According to state media, the government has also regained control of Libella town from the Tigray rebels. Libella is known for its rock churches and for its spiritual significance, especially among Orthodox Christians. The conflict between the Ethiopian government and the TPLF erupted a year ago. It has led to thousands of deaths and displacements. According to the United Nations, about 9.4 million people in the north of Ethiopia are now dependent on relief food. All right, CGTN's Gurum Chala is in Addis Ababa and is standing by. Gurum, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. Gurum, the government there is saying almost all of the Amhara region is now under the control of the Ethiopian Defense Forces. What does this say about the progress of the war in the north? Gurum? Well, we apologize for that break in communication. Hopefully we'll get Gurum back a little later on in the program. Let's turn our attention now to Tanzania, where the government there has explained the recent spread of flu headaches, and fevers that have triggered fears of the advent of the fourth wave of COVID-19 in the country. Now, this comes at a time when an increasing number of countries around the world are detecting more cases of the new variant Omicron. CGTN's Isaac Lukando has more.
The Tanzanian government says a recent rise in flu and fever cases in the country is not coronavirus related. It's urging the public to be calm as doctors in the country report treating such patients over the last 2 weeks. Officials have instead attributed the recent spike in cases to weather changes. Tanzania is yet to release the latest COVID-19 figures, but the country's prime minister insists that there are no cases of the latest variant, Omicron.
The Ministry of Health should explain this. A fourth wave has not entered Tanzania, and we do not have a single Omicron patient. Many people pass through here since we have an international airport, but it's just not the case.
Despite not having a single case of the new variant, the government says it is monitoring the situation closely. With only 2% of Tanzanians vaccinated against COVID-19, some doctors believe this may be contributing to rising alarm among members of the public. The situation is complicated further by recent reports that suggest many Tanzanians are relaxed about seeking medical attention when it comes to COVID-19. With cases of the latest COVID-19 variant rising around the world, the government here is urging the public to be vigilant. According to official figures, Tanzania has had around 26,000 infections and 734 coronavirus-related deaths reported in the country since the COVID-19 pandemic began. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
You're watching Africa Live. We'll see you on the other side of the break with more news stories. Here's what's ahead. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange's partner speaks exclusively to CGTN about his condition as he moves one step closer to facing prosecutors in the United States.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for sticking with us. Let's take a reminder of that news out of Addis Ababa. The Ethiopian government has said almost all areas of Amhara region are free of rebels. Waldia was the last stronghold of the TPLF rebels and was recaptured on Sunday. The exit of the TPLF from Amhara marks the end of their 4.5 months occupation there. We have our CGTN correspondent, Gurum Chala, standing by. Gurum, sorry we missed you a little while ago. Thank you for joining us again. Gurum, the government there is saying almost all of the Amhara region is down under the control of Ethiopian Defense Forces. What does this say about the progress of the war in the north? Gurum.
Richard, this was an important announcement that came from the government side. Remember, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed went back to the war front perhaps a month ago, and he's been leading all forces, including the Ethiopian National Defense Force, the militias, and others under his command. And that has resulted in freeing of most of the cities which were under the control of the TPLF force. You remember in the Afar regional state, there were so many significant areas which were freed after that. And also Dese, Kombolcha, and others, including Lalibela city, which was historically important for Ethiopia, and also UNESCO's registered heritage is also present in that city. The last stronghold, Waldia, as you said, Richard, was freed, and the government is saying that this is a mark that anyone should take as the beginning of the end of the occupation of the rebel force in the Amhara and Afar regional state. Afar has been freed a long time ago, and now Amhara regional state is free. TPLF on the other side is saying that this is not a victory registered by the government force. Rather, they have evacuated themselves out of these areas which we have mentioned earlier, Richard. So, in general terms, this is what we have heard, and offensive has continued to, perhaps according to the ENDF, to clean up some of the areas in the Amhara regional state, and war seems to be subsiding all in all.
All right, Garoom, important points that you've made there. You also indicated that the UN is removing its travel restrictions to Ethiopia. Tell us more about that.
So this is according to the United Nations Department for Safety and Security office itself, and it's saying that you remember the UN has restricted travels, non-essential travel, that is, to Addis Ababa, saying that it's been surrounded by rebel force and its staff are not safe. This has been repeated by embassies, including the United States and others. Now, the statement reads that following a significant improvement in the security situation of the southern parts of Amhara, Afar, and Addis Ababa, the designated official in consultation with other offices has recommended the lifting of the suspension of non-essential external travel and mission to Addis Ababa, and now that lifting of restrictions now is effective starting from this December 17, that is. So the lifting is, by the way, an important step. The Ethiopian officials are saying that, well, we've been saying this before, Addis Ababa has been safe. The US and others, including the United Nations, decided to remove their personnel out of Addis Ababa. Now that they are returning, we will welcome them with arms wide open, and will continue reiterating the fact that we should work together for the good of this country and also the regional peace and security situation. This is also yet another good news, Richard, as the UN is lifting these restrictions, travel restrictions, that is, because it is going to assist the humanitarian activity being seen in the north when it comes to delivering aid and others. So an important positive step for Ethiopia now that the United Nations has decided to lift non-essential travel restrictions to the country.
All right, well, there you have it. Almost all areas of Amhara region freed from rebels, and the government says it has full control of Lalibela. Garoom Chala, thank you for keeping us up to date with the very latest. Much appreciated. Moving along, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is one step closer to facing prosecutors in the United States. Last week, the UK's High Court ruled he can be extradited there, where the US wants to charge him with espionage. Assange has already spent over a decade detained in the UK, but this next step could be his toughest legal battle yet. CGTN's Brian Dorman takes a look back at how Assange and WikiLeaks ended up in the crosshairs of the US government.
Julian Assange. He's a household name the world over. Known for founding the controversial publishing website WikiLeaks in 2006, Assange now sits in a maximum security prison in the United Kingdom, and he's awaiting potential extradition to the United States to face the high crime of espionage. So how did Julian Assange go from relative obscurity as an Australian hacker to the US's enemy #1? WikiLeaks' big splash came in 2010 with the video Collateral Murder. The footage, recorded by a U.S. military helicopter in Iraq, showed U.S. soldiers shooting at a group of civilians. A Reuters photographer and his assistant were among those killed. Next came the Iraq War Logs, a collection of thousands of internal U.S. Army reports. It was the biggest leak of documents in U.S. military history and uncovered an additional 15,000 civilian deaths that the U.S. had not reported. Later in 2010 came the Afghanistan War Logs, called by the New York Times a devastating portrait of the U.S.'s failing war. In 2011, WikiLeaks, along with several of its publishing partners, including the New York Times, released files on the U.S.'s Guantanamo Bay detention camp. Those files revealed over 100 innocent people were illegally held at the base for years without charges, and some of them were tortured. Finally, Cablegate, the biggest release of classified U.S. documents ever released to the public. This series of massive disclosures embarrassed the U.S. government and put a spotlight on WikiLeaks. The Obama administration began investigating Assange personally. His crime? Allegedly violating the 100-year-old Espionage Act, essentially labeling Assange a spy. But for who? U.S. officials and critics of WikiLeaks say Julian Assange is a national security threat. This year, reports revealed the CIA during the Trump administration discussed abducting, even assassinating Assange. But supporters say Assange and WikiLeaks aren't doing anything out of the ordinary, that they operate just as journalists always have. Now, after years of legal battles and being held all the while without charges, Assange is facing potential extradition to the United States. And if that happens, he could spend the rest of his life in prison. His case is the biggest issue in journalism and free speech since the release of the Pentagon Papers in 1971, and may shape how news in the U.S. and beyond is sourced and produced for years to come. Brian Dorman, CGTN.
Well, we spoke to Julian Assange's partner, Stella Morris, in an exclusive interview. In a wide-ranging discussion, we talked about Julian Assange's condition, where his case is likely headed, and what his prosecution by the United States government means for press freedoms around the world.
Ms. Morris, welcome to CGTN.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
First, can you give us an update on the health condition of Mr. Assange? How is he doing? He reportedly had that stroke back in October. What about his mental condition at the moment?
Well, it's obviously deteriorating over time. He's been in Belmarsh prison for soon to be 3 years. This is his third Christmas in Belmarsh prison. He's not serving a sentence. He is there just because the U.S. wants him there. And this case is so incredibly outrageous. And there seems to be no justice to be found as of yet in the British justice system. So he remains imprisoned, and that's very tough on him, and it's tough on us as a family to realize that.
What happens next in terms of legal proceedings? We know you've said you will appeal the decision from the UK High Court. You've had a small window, about 2 weeks, to do that. What happens next?
We have 2 weeks. Well, actually, the 23rd of December is the deadline to present our request to appeal to the Supreme Court. There are still a number of issues that have not been assessed by the higher courts. That is, for example, that the U.S. is trying to extradite Julian for a political offense. But on the specific issue that the U.S. appealed on and won last week, we will now be appealing, and we have till Thursday.
Your thoughts on the U.S. argument that what was published on WikiLeaks constitutes a national security threat to the United States. Does that hold water?
Well, this is the kind of sweeping talking point that the U.S. has advanced from day one, but when it comes to actually substantiating that talking point, they come up with zero. Under oath, the U.S. government has said that no person has come to harm as a result of these publications. Internally, it was published in Reuters in January 2011 that they had been overstating any harm, that in fact the impact on the U.S. was no harm or just a political embarrassment, basically. And the U.S. is taking this case because they want to silence a publisher. It is that simple. They want to silence someone who has been publishing true information to the public about government crimes.
Well, obviously you have another legal battle in front of you. Are you prepared for either result? Have you had a chance to imagine what life will be like if you win the appeal?
Well, I just want Julian to be free, and of course I imagine what our life will be like when we're together. We'll take long walks in nature. He hasn't been in nature for 11 years. He was arrested on the 7th of December 2010, so he hasn't been a free man for 11 years, and he's not convicted of any crime. It's he needs to live a normal life. He has a right to live a normal life. This is a political case, and he's being politically persecuted, and that's just everything I'm focused on now is getting Julian free.
Will he continue with his work on WikiLeaks if he, becomes a free man eventually?
Well, Julian has, many projects in his mind. He wants to write books. He's been invited to teach at universities and so on. So I don't know what he'll choose to do. The most important thing is that he has to recover. His health is rapidly deteriorating. He's had a stroke. He could die in there any day. It's just he's imprisoned for doing his job. And so, what comes after, I hope that we'll be able to, reach this question about what he's going to do next. But right now it's about freeing Julian.
Ms. Morris, thank you for joining us here on CGTN. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
The River Nile is one of the world's great waterways, flowing through 6 African countries. From its source in Uganda, where the White Nile begins, it is a tourism haven offering countless opportunities for hundreds of thousands to visit and have fun. Leon Sienge has traveled along part of the Nile and tells us more.
The River Nile, considered the world's longest river. From Lake Victoria, the Nile emerges and travels northwards over 6,600 kilometers into the Mediterranean Sea. For many, this river is a source of life.
You're going to see a fisherman on water, but he has a family that he supports back home. Myself, I am going to have a tourist. I bring them here, and then I have the boat captain who is going to bring me here. I have to pay the boat captain. I have to get paid myself. Then the tourist has to get a very good experience.
And the beautiful experiences here are countless. From a distance, one can see the country's first stay cable bridge that joins 2 regions. The small bird sanctuaries also provide a picturesque view.
I've had a wonderful time here. It's very amazing. I would advise people to get to know the origins of literally the history of the beautiful places in Uganda.
Downstream, the River Nile offers more beautiful sights. It is in these places that the river's calmness is disrupted. This is one of the famous spots along the River Nile. It is the Busowoko Falls, and here is where the exciting stuff happens. Hundreds of revelers gather here mostly on the weekends. Besides the sights and sounds of the water rattling the rocks, a deep foreign Nile water massage is a must.
I've been here from 1 and I'm still here until when I get tired to be in massage.
A trip along the Nile is not complete without the adrenaline-raising activity, bungee jumping. It is an unrivaled experience.
Just imagine a person getting off the cliff and it's like you're having a soft touch to the Nile. People are flying all over the world to come and have that soft touch to the Nile.
And if the hair-rising jumps are not your kind of thing, then tubing on the Nile can offer some great relaxation. And with all its adventures, the River Nile is indeed a great place that leaves the forever memories as it winds farther away. Leon Sonyange, CGTN, Jinja, Central Uganda.
And the news continues on Africa Live. We've got your business segment coming up next. Here's a peek at that headline. Nigeria concludes testing for 5G as it aims to have the widest 5th generation network in Africa in 2022. And a new app is unveiled to protect the endangered rhino ecosystem in South Africa.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects
to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to Africa Live. We appreciate your company. Nigeria is targeting to have the widest fifth-generation network in Africa in 2022. The country, which instituted its 5G policy framework in 2019, has already concluded testing of the technology. And CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam reports.
Nigeria, as a country, being the giant of Africa, feels it is necessary for us to kickstart the process of 5G deployment.
Nigeria's Communications Minister Issa Pantami unveiling plans to roll out the nation's fifth-generation network.
We hope that by 2022, Nigeria will have the largest 5G coverage in Africa.
The government approved the deployment of a 5G network in September. Authorities believe it would bolster the nation's economy and help in tackling the insecurity challenges.
If you want to address the issue of insecurity, you need things like robotics, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence. You need big data analytics. All these emerging technologies cannot be deployed effectively without 5G, because 5G gives you real-time communication. At the top of our agenda for 5G deployment is to support our security institutions to provide the network so that they will leverage on and address the security challenges.
Digital technology has been a key enabler of all other sectors in Nigeria. The nation is leveraging on its credentials as one of Africa's largest digital economies, with a massive telecoms market and many internet subscribers as well.
At this point, we're now talking about a lot of data privacy. So as a country and as a nation, it's good that we engage in it now so that we can own our own 5G. We can own our own data. You understand? We can warehouse our data, because a lot of this information is going to go out. A lot of this information is going to be used. Nigeria has to have a stand in order to own that data, in order to participate, in order to have a voice on how the data is being used.
The 5G Implementation Committee has been working on the network broadband plan. Two companies, including South African telecoms giant MTN, were awarded a spectrum auction to commence the rollout of 5G technology, and the government's hoping to fast-track its deployment. Kelechi Mekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
To South Africa, where a new app has been developed to assist in efforts to protect Ren Oosterwolde vegetation, the country's most endangered ecosystem. The Global Overberg Ren Oosterwolde Watch app utilizes satellite imagery and machine learning to inform authorities when this habitat is illegally plowed for agricultural purposes. So far, the app has produced encouraging results, which are assisting efforts to protect the habitat from extinction. CGTN's Travis Andrews has more.
Ren Oosterwolde, or rhinoceros field as it is known in English, is a natural shrubland in South Africa that is considered highly endangered. Its rich soil has for many years attracted the attention of illegal plowing activities for agriculture, but that now could change. The Global Overberg Ren Oosterwolde Watch app was developed using satellite imagery and advanced algorithms to give authorities an eye in the sky to keep track on illegal plowing activities.
We've developed this app in partnership with, in close collaboration with the Provincial Department of Environmental Affairs, who are in charge of law enforcement in this area. And so we've been working closely with them and passing on information when we detect that there has been habitat loss.
Ren Oosterwolde, which was once grazing land for large mammals such as the black rhino, has now turned to wheat and canola fields in the Western Cape. Using satellite imagery to build a solid legal case against the illegal destruction of Ren Oosterwolde is what underpins the app, because the environmental stakes are high.
Almost 95% of its natural extent has been lost in the past few decades it's been converted to agriculture. So the few bits that remain have an incredibly high abundance of plants that are threatened with extinction, perhaps the highest concentration of plants threatened with extinction anywhere in the world.
It is estimated there remains just 30,000 hectares of Renosterveld left in South Africa, which are located in small pockets of land dotted around the country. The fertile soils of the Renosterveld have seen this habitat cleared for farming over the past 3 centuries. Just fragments still survive.
These are the most marginal habitats from a farming point of view. There are many lands even that have been farmed, which farmers will still tell you are marginal and should never have been ploughed. So anything that's viable economically is gone.
For now, conservationists say while the app is very helpful, it is working in partnership with the landowners that will likely yield the best results when it comes to saving this endangered natural heritage. That's Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
And we are not done just yet. We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Here's what's ahead. We take a look at Burkina Faso's chances at the upcoming Africa Cup of Nations.